Okay, good morning. Today's March 3rd, 2023. And wow, yeah, I'm a few minutes late on this because this is not easy to set up all this stuff I have going on. And my camera is actually incorrect on the Tiger, which is weird. So give me a minute to get these things correct. There we go. Good morning, Ulan. Let me know if you can hear me well. And I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Okay. All right. Oh, good afternoon for you. Sorry, I thought you said good morning. Good afternoon. So at times I may be blocking the palette camera. I'm kind of in a painting cockpit right now. Everything is surrounding me. I barely have any room to do anything. But I think it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. Oh, but I forgot my tea. Good morning, Thinker. Oh, wonderful. I'm glad you can hear me. Thank you for letting me know. Let me grab my tea and I'll be right back. Okay, looking good. So, today we're going to start oil painting. I'm very excited about this. It took me just a long time to get everything set up yesterday. You wouldn't believe the setup I have here. I have my softbox light from Aperture, my shotgun mic from Rode. I have one digital camera set up to the left of me that you can see my painting on. I have another camera set up to the right of me where you could see my palette. I have my iPad set up so I can look at my image to paint from, my phone so that I could watch the stream, and then all my other stuff around me, and my tea. It took a lot of time to get this set up. And I still haven't seen if it's paint worthy, like if I can actually paint with all the stuff around me. Because it's within like everything's at my shoulder. And I'm getting out some paper towels right now, so sorry for the extra noise. So here's the way it's gonna run this morning, is as I set up, I'm gonna be going over materials. This way, I could have went ahead and set this up beforehand, but I figured, no, I'll go over materials at the same time. That way you can see from the beginning to end what happens. And my setup is usually pretty quick every time for painting, because I don't do the same setup every time. I soak my brushes. I have a you can't see it, it's right below the palette camera here, but my palette is actually sitting on a tray that closes up, that can hook to my easel. and it can close up this palette so that it helps keep the paints dry. All right, so the first thing I got out was paper towels, just basic paper towels. We like to use a company called Who Gives a Crap. They, kind of environmental for as far as paper towels and toilet paper, so I might want to check them out. WhoGivesACrap.com or something like that. They're really good. Next thing I'm going to do is I have all my brushes in a brush soak. And I've made several videos about this, so I'm not going to show that off. You can check out the videos for that, but basically what I do is I don't clean my brushes. I put them into a bath of oil so that they just sit there. And then every time before I get ready to paint, I just wipe them out on a paper towel like this. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to be using Monarch brushes from, this is Winsor & Newton Monarch. Let me see if I can get a close-up of that. Yeah, that's pretty good. So Winsor & Newton Monarch brushes. These are synthetic brushes. They're usually what's called like a finishing brush. But I use them for the entirety of these paintings. Why do I do that? Because normally when you see a traditional painter, an oil painter, they start out with a bristle brush, and then they move, as they move into the painting, they move to these kind of softer finishing brushes. I found that I like to paint detailed right out the box, right at the beginning. I like the texture of these brushes. Just over time, this is what I figured out. This is what I like, honestly. I don't like putting down a whole bunch of paint as well. And the bristle brushes are designed to put down a lot of paint. So I don't paint very impasto. What I do is I paint in layers. So I have a total of 3 brushes that I'll probably be working with, maybe 4, depending. But these are smaller Monarch brushes. They're a number 2 Monarch brush. I don't go to very large brushes, even on a large painting. I like a lot of texture, things like that. I'm actually going to tilt my painting a little bit so it's facing me some. It's pretty much facing away. Make sure that looks good on the stream. Yeah, we're still good. All right, that's much better. Nice. And like I said, sorry, I'm going to be covering up the palette sometimes because the camera is so close to me that when I barely lean over to the right, I'll be putting my elbow into the palette camera. The other brush that I may use on this stream, maybe not today, but later streams, and especially when I get into black areas or any area that has a lot of glare. It's a bigger brush, so it's taken a while for me to get all that oil out of it. So this is a really old brush. This is a Langnickel, a Royal Langnickel, Langnickel. And it's a super soft, this is not a synthetic brush. I bought these years and years ago. And they actually come from Richard Schmid. If you know who Richard Schmid was, he passed away in 2009. Master artist, just absolutely amazing. And these are the brushes that he would use almost exclusively. I found them to be super, super soft, but they're wonderful for knocking down the edges that paint makes and getting rid of all glare. So I'll talk about that whenever it comes up, but I'm going to get that brush ready. So those are my brushes. I'm working on a glass palette, and what I'll do is I'll start putting out my paints now. And to my right, I have a roller cart. It's a 3-tier roller cart from IKEA. And I have all my paints and everything on it. It's actually really nice. One of the things I keep on my cart is pliers. See, I'll put them over here. Little pliers. Because paint tubes like to, you know, when they get paint around the top, they like to not want to open. So the pliers are really good so they don't try and break your fingers just trying to open them up. Every single paint that I use is from Gamblin. I just made it simple on myself. Everything is from Gamblin. I just use their entire line. I was thinking about it last night. You know, why do I use Gamblin? This is titanium white. Why do I use Gamblin? Well, I remember years and years ago when I was trying to determine, okay, probably about 10 years ago when I was trying to determine, okay, what paints do I want to use? I noticed that in every art store that I went to, Gamblin was there, but Winsor & Newton wasn't. And, you know, you couldn't find like Williamsburg or I can't remember, Michael Harding, and especially Old Holland. You couldn't find those paints in many other stores. So I was like, you know what? I don't know where I'm going to be in the future. So, and I don't want to have to change paint brands all the time. So I'm going to go with Gamblin. They have a great line of colors. I liked all their colors. And they had a whole host of mediums that I liked. They just do everything. They provide the whole value. So that was titanium white. That's going to be the only opaque paint that I use. And the next paint I'm going to use, and this is I'm going to change up my palette a little bit for this painting because we have oranges on here. I'll probably add an orange in. The next, also from Gamblin, is going to be Hansa Yellow Medium. So Hansa Yellow Medium. Bam. It's going to go on the right over here. I don't put out a lot of paint each time, especially for colors that I know that dry really quickly. There's several colors that dry really quickly, and I'll go over those. That's Hansa Yellow Medium. One thing I will add, actually maybe not, because I stay away from cadmiums now, and I still have this full tube of cadmium orange. But I don't paint with cadmiums anymore. I don't like heavy metals, and cadmium is a heavy metal, so we're going to put that aside. What I do have is a transparent orange, which is nice. Most of my palette, well, yeah, all of my palette is either transparent or semi-transparent, and I'll talk about why I do that as well. So we're going to put this right above the yellow. And the way that I organize my palette is warm to cool. And there's not a specific reason for that. It's just how I've organized my palette. Next thing I put on is Naphthol Scarlet. No more cadmiums. So I used to use like cadmium red light, cadmium red medium, or just cadmium red. Naphthol Scarlet is the same color. Actually uses the same pigment without the cadmium as cadmium red light. But it doesn't have the heavy metal in there, which makes it actually no, it's got the same pigment number, but I think it's a different pigment. And the next one is one of my most favorites, Transparent Earth Orange. I put this on my palette all the time, every single painting, especially for doing figurative work. For Caucasian skin, for darker skin, brown, black, it works wonderful. It can get just an amazing amount of tones. Transparent Earth Orange, it's something I always put on. What's next? Oh, I can't forget one of the staples that you'll see on almost every palette is alizarin permanent. Not alizarin crimson, but alizarin permanent. Because alizarin permanent is permanent. Alizarin crimson is not. It has some troubles with it over the years, and they've formulated a new color. A new pigment that looks the same, but lasts a lot longer. Now, as you can see how I'm organizing my palette, it's, you know, super warm on the right, all the way to cool, like a cool red, that kind of thing. Usually, I mean, with this, I also kind of do, it's kind of like a split primary. Usually, I don't have the orange on here. I'm doing that because we're dealing with an orange tiger, right? But usually it's a split primary. A split primary is when you have yellow, red, and blue, and you have both warm and cool of each. So you would have a warm yellow and a cool yellow, a warm blue, which is the red here, and a warm red, which is this red here, and a cool red, which is alizarin permanent. So naphthol crimson, alizarin permanent, and then a warm blue and a cool blue. Can't remember what is the warm blues and what are the cool blues. I think what I'm going to be putting on next is a warmer blue. Maybe the phthalo blue is a warmer blue because it gets a little bit into green, which is a bit of a warmer color. So this is ultramarine blue. Gambling always for me, just making things easy. And you know, here's one thing I'll say, like some of these I have big tubes for. I would suggest you'll probably save some money up front by buying the big tubes. And it's cost effective, but very problematic in the future. There's a tendency, I mean, tubes, you would think, you know, unless I, you know, finished one of these tubes every 6 months or less, like every 2 months, I would keep it. But I'm moving to the smaller tubes because there's a tendency for the paint to get really thick in these tubes, especially for one of my next colors. Not this color. This is going to be the only like really different color, sap green. So it's not a primary, it's kind of it's a secondary. Well, the orange is a secondary as well. Most of the things I put on can be considered somewhat of a primary color. And that's way too much sap green. I shouldn't have put that much on. So that's sap green. Why do I put sap green on there? Well, the reason why is because most of my palette is very warm. It's a very warm tones. And even this last color is very warm. So this is burnt umber, almost essential. I'm just going to put a tiny bit out because this one will dry really fast. But most of my palette is really warm. As you can see here, we got yellows, like this whole side is nothing but warm plus burnt umber. And sap green is the perfect color to neutralize all those warm colors. So if you need to get closer to gray, you add your sap green. And that's really all I use. Honestly, I put this orange out, but I don't need it. I could mix it if I wanted to. But keeping my palette pretty simple. And I mean, I have just a massive amount of tubes of paints over here, but I don't use them all unless I need to reach some really crazy color in a picture or something. And that's it. I'm ready to paint. Later on, I'll be using a medium. This is the solvent-free gel by Gamblin'. This will only come in on the second pass. So after I get a full single layer of paint down on this whole painting, will I actually add medium to this paint. But at the beginning, it's going to be nothing but paint right out of the tube. Okay. I hope you guys are ready. I'm almost a little nervous. I am a little nervous. You know, and that's one thing. It's going to happen with every painting you start. We've worked so hard in this. This isn't like digital. If I put it down, I have to deal with it. I can't control Z, and I can't hide the layer. I can't, yeah, I can't do anything. Once it's down, right? So, where do we start? I always start everything that I do, whether it's digital, traditional, drawing, or painting. I find what is close to my center of interest. So this is going to be the tiger's head, right? And I find what's easiest. You know, what is the easiest for me to do right now that I could just put down and not have a problem with? Also, I tend to want to start with the darker colors first. So let's do that. I'm going to mix up, because where I'm going to start is I'm going to start right where the really dark part of the eyes are. And as I put this brush down, you can see how big it is compared to everything that's on the canvas. So, you know, if I'm using the flat side of the brush, I'll be taking up a big portion of this whole section. In a lot of cases, I'll be using the sharp side of the brush to really kind of get in there. So this is an uncomfortable size. And that's exactly where you want to be. You want to be a little bit uncomfortable. Here's the super secret mixture of dark. So I'm going to take some burnt umber. And yeah, that's one thing you'll notice is I don't have any black on my palette. You don't need black. So burnt umber, ultramarine blue, and a little bit more ultramarine blue because I want this to be a little bit cooler. And then some alizarin permanent. And that was too much alizarin permanent. It's going to be purple now. Well, this makes up a really good black color. It's almost as black can go, right? If I put black next to this, it would be darker, but not by much. Okay. Also, you know, as I pulled in the alizarin permanent and I said that's going to be more purple, the more you paint, the more you'll get an understanding of the tinting strength of all of your other paints. So you can't really see it now because this is so dark. I would have to add just a tiny bit of white to this. And maybe you still can't see that on the stream, but it's kind of a grayish purple color. But I'm fine with that. It'll be fine because at its darkest dark, it's going to be somewhat hidden. So we always want to compress our value range as well. So if this is the darkest dark that I can mix up, what I put on my canvas, I want to be a little bit lighter than that. And for the stripes, which are the darkest thing on the canvas, I want them to be on the cooler side. And I think maybe the purple is pretty good now that I'm thinking about it, because a lot of the digital that we did, you know, had those kind of magenta, maybe tealish tones. So let's actually add a little bit of blue in there. So I added just a little bit of white to it to keep it cool, but lighten it up. Keep it in those blue tones, but lighten it up a bit. Now it's extremely important that throughout your painting that you establish those ranges. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and put down that dark color. And as soon as I put this down, it's, you know, I'm thinking, wow, that's not near dark enough. And for me being as far away from this painting as I am, my hands are shaking. Look at that. Yeah. So it's not super dark. Maybe let's go just a little bit darker. Maybe I added a bit too much white. So I'm going to be adding more alizarin crimson, or I'm sorry, alizarin permanent, burnt umber, and even more ultramarine blue. The one thing that you have to really understand is if you're in these really dark colors, even the tiniest bit of white is really going to make a huge difference. It can go to gray almost right away. So I got to be careful with that white, and I was not careful. Feels like forever since I've been painting. Let's go over to this other side. There we go. Very carefully putting these down. And I can even like kind of choke up on my brush here for these smaller areas. Now, one thing you'll notice is I'm not going with the form if I can help it. Right here, it's so thin, I need to go with the form. I always go against the form when I'm painting. I do this because going against the form describes the volume of the form. So for example, this stripe is going left to right, but I'm painting it at a 90 degree from that with these little small dots, and that will describe form as much as we can. The only place I won't do it is like this stripe here at the top, which is already describing the form in and of itself. You know, we'll keep that there. Same with this one. So this could be an extra long live stream because I spent a whole 30 minutes talking about materials. And I want to get a lot of painting in. So I planned it for 2 hours. So if you can stay that long, that's great. If you can't, that's fine too, because it's being recorded. Heck, in an hour and a half, my back may say, no, you need to stop. Okay, so, you know what's interesting about this is I'm barely looking at my iPad right now to reference what I have here. I've worked on this tiger so often that I know this really well now. And my palette camera just did something weird. It made a sound, so. But it's still showing. Hopefully I'm still here. Yay, okay, I'm still here. Weird. Stop doing that, camera. I can't even tell if it's in focus. I think my palette camera is in focus. I'm looking at such a small screen, I have no idea. Let me know. I mean, it may not matter. Maybe it's so small on the screen that it's difficult to see for you. So any kind of feedback on, you know, what's happening on the stream, just let me know. So I'm going to be going around and just putting a lot of these dark colors down. This one dark color. I'm going to be basically filling in every one of these stripes on the head with this dark color. Especially with this subject matter, I think describing this form, and honestly, the hairs on the tiger describe the tiger's form as well. We're getting both the texture of the hair and describing the form at the same time. So really important. But if you look at my other tutorials on Gumroad, the eye tutorial, the nose tutorial, you will see that I do the same thing even for the softest skin. And I'm just kind of moving around here. Kind of all over the place. Where it's going to be really difficult, as I was saying just a minute ago about these dark colors that I'm putting in, these darker stripes. If I add just a little bit of white color to it, it's going to adjust it tremendously. And the same is true for a very light color. If I add just a little bit of, you know, this darker black to it, it's going to really throw it off. And that becomes a huge issue when you have colors like these little stripes up here, which are right, you know, there's a black next to a white. You'll get into mixing that you don't want to do accidentally. And even the tiniest bit of this darker color getting mixed within the white that's right next to it could kind of spread throughout the whole white, and you have a big problem. So you got to be careful when you set these colors right next to each other. Now the good thing is, I'll work today probably establishing a lot of these dark colors, maybe some of the oranges and the light colors, we'll see. And by tomorrow, most of this darker color will be dry. It'll definitely be dry to the touch almost. It'll probably be tacky. And anything I put around it won't mix as much with it. So as I think about it, this is a pretty good plan as well. I'm looking at this brush and I'm seeing that, you know, it's a little splayed out. Like it's not perfectly round anymore. And it's not a perfect filbert brush. Oh, by the way, I love filberts more than anything. They give you a softer edge. And I like it when the brushes begin to age a bit and to splay out a little bit. It does a lot of the work for you. Getting, you know, a lot, but I like a lot of texture, so, you know, it's really up to you on what you prefer on that. You may prefer that the brushes stay as pristine as possible, but no, I don't really care for that. I have brushes that I've worked down to the nub just about. But every time when you work them to a different point in their life, they take on a different quality that can be used for different things. It's like the brushes are learning in different ways. They're getting older and, you know, they can't play basketball like they used to. Or maybe they can't, you know, run the marathons like they used to. But I tell you what, they could teach others. They could bring a lot of texture to the life or something like that. That's a funny analogy, sorry. The life of a brush. Let's do an animation about the entire life of a brush. It'll be an analogy for our lives. Right? It gets so dark down in here that I could almost put this everywhere and it would be fine. Now, if you work in this method, I'm going to mix up some more of my dark color. If you work in this method, the paint isn't fluid. It's thick. And because it's, you know, right out of the tube, it's going to be thick. It has its own bit of an impasto to it, but I don't put a ton on my brush. And this is such a small brush and a synthetic brush that it's, you can't really put a lot on your brush, honestly. So you kind of have to get used to, if you paint this way, the texture of the paint. The viscosity, that's the word I'm looking for. If you really enjoy, you know, painting in a fluid manner, I would suggest using the, you see I have it over here. I haven't really used it. Galkid Light by Gambling. Wow, that is really bright. I wonder if I should turn my ISO down some more. Let's see. Yeah, that's closer to the reality of what I'm seeing. But you still can't see that label. It's a Galkid Light by Gambling. It's a alkyd medium that is very fluid. It does have a bit of petroleum distillates in it, which is a solvent. And if I ever feel like, okay, I'm going to start drawing with a brush, I would probably use that instead of solvents. Solvents are just bad. We don't need them. We have so much more technological advances in oil paint right now that the solvent idea should go away. Excuse me. Okay, under the nose. I'm worrying a little bit about drawing, but not that much. That's why, you know, this such a calm way of painting for me, honestly. I've got my drawing figured out. And now I'm, you know, I reduced it to almost paint by numbers. The argument to that would be, yeah, it's, you know, not as free and loose. But there's also drawbacks to that kind of freedom as well. I was talking to a friend of mine last Sunday, who's also an oil painter. And he starts out drawing, you know, he looks at his image that he has and he just starts out drawing from that, and he just keeps working it. And he works it like, you know, you would clay. Starts out very rough, and then it keeps kind of moving the paint around until it gets more and more detailed. And he really enjoys working that way. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And I've tried that in the past. And what I disliked was all the time that I would have to spend fixing and fixing and fixing and fixing, especially with a figure. And then at the very end, when you're like, you've looked at your painting for hours on end, you take a photo of it, and you see all of these drawing mistakes that you still have to fix. There is a freedom to it, but with that freedom, you deal with everything all at once. You deal with the composition. Well, hopefully you have at least the composition figured out first. You deal with the drawing, the value, all aspects of color, everything at once. And it's hard. It's much harder. And I was like, you know what? Why don't we break up all of these into different steps so that at the end, when I'm actually putting paint on the canvas, I have number one, a higher success rate, a lot less fixing going on, and it's much more calm and relaxing. So this is the way I do it. It's very calm and relaxing for me. I think that, you know, this is why non-artists love the, what do you call them? They're like color by number for adults now. Those books got really big. And, you know, most of us just like painting. We'd like to get around the whole problem of drawing and then get into painting as quick as we can. And this is the solution for that. Because with this method, doing your composition first, going through the design process, which is part of the downloads for the traditional and digital live, see my Gumroad link in the description. So that whole design process will walk you through setting up how to get a composition that will prepare you for a very successful painting. Getting all of your problems figured out within the drawing phase, within the color phase, getting a better understanding of, you know, the reason why you're painting this, and if you're communicating what you want to communicate, all kinds of stuff. Figured all of that out at the beginning. And then when it finally comes time to putting paint to canvas, it's a lot simpler. Now, the one thing I will say is this painting, the digital painting, I worked this up much more than I would any other painting that I've done. Most of, like, if you look at on my website, chrisbeaven.com, you'll see that I do a lot of figurative works. And these are all based on photos that I've manipulated in some way. And usually I would just go directly from the photo. But we needed to create a composition all of our own, right? So I created the whole digital work and then worked it up to this point. Oh, Thinker asks, have you ever used the safflower oil as a medium to thin out the paint, or will it yellow or cause some other problem over time? So safflower oil is a semi-drying oil, okay? And that's why it's used only for cleaning and only for kind of like a bath, okay? Because it would sit for, I don't know how long, way too long before it ever dried. And we don't really want to use semi-drying oils within our paint, because you could be waiting for 6 months just for it to get dry enough for you to start another layer. It's, you know, the whole fat over lean thing, it would destroy fat over lean rule, because the idea of fat over lean is you put layers underneath that dry quicker than layers on top. And that's why, you know, when I soak my brushes in safflower oil, I make sure that I get out as much of that safflower oil as possible before I start painting with them again. I squeeze them into a paper towel. So, you know, short answer long. And I need to actually move my camera now. No, do not use safflower oil as a medium. It's not meant for that. You should never use it like that. The better fluid medium, if you want an oil that's a fluid medium, is the exact oil that they use in the paints themselves, which is refined linseed oil, if you want to use that. That would be for subsequent layers. The only medium that I would use for like starting out, I'm gonna go ahead and darken up most of this. The only medium I would use for starting out would be the alkyd medium, because it's made to dry faster. Like if you're drawing out your painting or something like that. Okay, I need to move down the canvas, and you guys have to see it. But I'm so packed in here that I don't know how I'm going to lift the canvas up. I don't know if I can get back there. Well, if I do, I'm going to be covering up the palette camera for a bit. Hold on a second. This is a good chance for me to stand up. I don't stand up out of my seat enough, and my back starts hurting. Okay, let's get back to it. I have to jump back into the cockpit. I should really take a picture of this setup. Everything is right next to me. I'm continuing on with my purplish black color. Oh, here's something good to talk about. This is essential. Well, I talk about a lot of essential things, but this is another idea as far as simplification of a process to help guarantee success in your painting. When you're starting out on your painting, or when you're painting at all, like this is the beginning layers of this painting, the only thing you really want to worry about is value. Not hue and not saturation. Don't worry about those two. And that's, well, and in this instance, the only thing I'm really worried about is drawing and value. So I'm making sure that I put down these strokes in the right place. And I'm making sure that their value is where they need to be, which is pretty easy in this aspect, because it's the darkest value I can make are a little bit lighter than the darkest value I can make. So why value first and not hue or saturation? Well, no matter what the hue or what the saturation is, you can still come out with a good looking painting, a painting that describes the form well, maybe not a good looking painting. That's subjective. You can come out with a painting that describes the form well if you get the value in the drawing correct. I mean, it's just like a charcoal drawing that I did here. As long as, the value is going to be there, you don't have to worry about it. As long as the drawing and the value is correct, it will look like what it's supposed to look like. So that's number one. That's like your foundation. So, I could flip this thing completely opposite. I could paint the stripes white and everything else black, and it'd still look like a tiger. Or, I could go extreme saturation. I guess that first example was kind of wrong from what I'm talking about, but like I could really saturate these dark colors, but as long as they stay dark, it's going to describe the tiger well. Okay. I could use a purple, I could use a teal, a very dark teal. It doesn't matter what the hue is. as long as that value is there. One of the problems I'm seeing with the iPad now is anytime I touch it with my finger, I add a new fingerprint, and it makes it really hard to see those darker values. Like, all I'm looking at is fingerprints. I'm cleaning up my iPad. Didn't have that problem on the computer because I would adjust it with a mouse. Yeah. All right, but there's just a lot of dark colors under here. I'm gonna have a lot of fun just throwing these daubs down everywhere. These little chunks of color. And you can see they're getting really dry. Kind of, you know, it's almost like a dry brush. Not a lot of paint on there. It's thin, and it will dry pretty quickly. And at first, you're probably thinking, well, you're not really putting much paint down. You're kind of just it's like a detailed block in. You know, block ins are meant to be not detailed at all. You know, it's like one color all over the place. But I'm making sure that I block in things, but it's much more detailed than an exact, so that corrections don't have to happen later. But it's also a preparation for the plan that I have, well, for my method of working. I work in multiple layers, which adds just a ton of richness to the art, I feel. When you get all these layers in, I'm gonna mix up more of my dark color. Ultramarine blue, burnt umber, alizarin permanent. And I really love the second layer on these paintings, because the first layer is kind of the establishment of everything. I establish the value ranges in their place. I get an idea of where the color needs to be, or where the hue needs to be. I need to get my language right on that, because when you say color, you're talking about three aspects. You're talking about value, hue, saturation, or chroma, however you want to say it. So when I say color, I usually mean hue, but I need to get a little bit more clear on that one. So we're establishing, you know, all of these aspects of the painting. All of the complexity is being established and kind of built up, you know, one brick at a time. I've worked before in the past where you block in like the whole thing. You know, you throw in a bunch of orange and stuff all over the tiger and green in the background, and you just have paint everywhere, and it's thick and thin, and all of it's wrong. Maybe the drawing's on a little bit, but you just do a generalization of value, of hue and saturation. And then the rest of the painting, the entire rest of the painting, you know what you're doing? Nothing but fixing. You're adjusting what's there. I guess it depends on how you look at it. You know, you're adjusting what's there. But you have to deal with what's on the canvas as well. So, for example, if I put down like an orange that was way too intense and way too dark on the tip of the nose, or, you know, the bridge of the nose for this tiger, as I continued working on that painting, I would have to mix up paint that would mix into that would make it, you know, lighter and less intense. So my mixture on my palette would be different than what I actually want to see on my canvas, because I have to make an understanding that, oh, it's going to mix with what I see on the canvas, so I always have to make that adjustment too. You see where the complexity comes in on that? And that's why, I used to do this huge block in, but I don't do that anymore. I guess, with years and years of practice on that, you could come to, an understanding of how to work it well. But why spend all that time? And just change up the method. Richard Schmidt actually worked that way. He would just throw down a whole, kind of flesh tone for the portrait, and then, just adjust as he went. And, he was amazing at it. Now, this is just the way I work, honestly. Will you cover the entire canvas with paint before you start on the second layer, or do a second layer on the tiger before working on the background? No. Yeah, good question. Thank you for that. No, I will cover the entire canvas with an initial layer before going back to the first layers that I started. And why do I do that? Number one is you can't finish anything on the canvas until you get an understanding of everything on the canvas. The color of the palm frond and the bottom right, and the value and the hue and the saturation informs the color, hue, saturation, value, and everything within the tiger's head. It's interesting how the entirety of your canvas informs everything else. Especially, like the background around the tiger. We have to get something down on that before we start, our subsequent layer, which does a lot of adjustments. And the other reason why I like to do it is because it gives these first layers that you work on time to dry, so that when you come back to them, they're dry enough for you to put a glazing layer over. So for example, I'll work, this morning, today, in the next half an hour, because we're already an hour in, I'm going to spend another half an hour on this. I'll work on getting as much of this dark color down as possible. Probably moving down the tiger, because there's a lot of this dark color everywhere. And then, tomorrow I'll move up back to the tiger head and start on everything else. Probably the eye color, then the orange, and all the really rich colors this tiger's going to get. That's going to be a lot of fun. I'll start on that next. Get the tiger's head kind of figured out. Move down the body. And then probably jump into the... I don't know. I'll have to figure that one out. But then I'll probably jump into the background behind the tiger's head. Yeah, I'll probably work the whole body first, and then background behind the tiger's head, and work it down, light to dark. By the time I get the whole tiger body done and the background done, the head that we're working on here will be completely dry and ready for the glazing layer. And then I'll work it the same way. Head to feet on the tiger, top of the background, the back of the background. Will there be some mixes? Yeah, there's going to be some edge mixes that are going to happen, with whatever's next to the tiger's head, and that's not going to be a big deal. But I've done that so many times before, where you can continually move around the painting and add glazing layers and things like that after this whole initial layer is done. I've done it to a point where I'm tracking 2 and 3 different layers at a time. Well, no, that's right. It's not 2 and 3 layers at the same time. So I would be on the second layer for the whole painting, and then I would go back through and say, oh, okay, I'm going to do a third layer to increase the interest, the texture even more, and then go back through the whole thing again. But here's what I'll say. That second layer takes like a tenth of the time as the first layer. Well, probably not that much. It's less than half the time. My tutorials that I did with my eye tutorial and nose tutorial. I did a mouth one as well that I need to edit and get up there, and an ear one. On every single one, it took 3 times as long to do the initial layer as it did to do the glazing layer. And the glazing layer is so much fun because everything is done. You don't have to, you're just making things look a little bit better, adding in some more saturation, less saturation, maybe changing a value a little bit here and there. But for the most part, everything is done for you. And it's just like, oh, how can we improve this? How can we make it pop or stand out or interesting in some way? How can we increase texture? Kind of like we were doing on the digital painting where we were trying out all these teal colors and keeping the same value and maybe saturation, but changing up the hue and seeing, how we can add all kinds of interest to it in that way. And wow, I need to move my canvas up again. Okay. Let me know if I'm not covering anything, or I was gonna say, let me know if this is too boring, and I'll work on it all for the stream, but honestly, I don't have time. I got so much other things going on that I'm gonna be doing this entire thing on the stream. Whether it's boring or not, it's gonna happen. I'm gonna put some more dark color all down here. Just really kind of throw that in. It's just so dark. I want to increase this texture that's going to happen here. Okay, and now I will lift up my canvas. Okay. That worked. And I keep crossing in front of the palette camera, but honestly, the palette is not changing much at all. One whole stream of one color, one value, one hue, one saturation. It's kind of like doing the charcoal drawing over again, right? When are we going to get to the fun part, Chris? This is the fun part. We've been in the fun part the whole time. I see, maybe the artists you see on the news and things like that are everywhere, where they've trained to do one painting. It's like some guy and, he's painting something. You can't tell what it is. He's just throwing paint everywhere on this big canvas. And then all of a sudden, he grabs the canvas, turns it upside down, and then you see this portrait of Bruce Lee. And you're like, wow, that was amazing. And it did the whole thing in probably 3 minutes. That's not this. That's not this at all. one of the things that I really love, you guys probably remember, or I don't know, maybe, I mean, it depends on if you watched or not, but at least in America, there used to be a show called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood with Fred Rogers, and he did everything. He scripted it, he played the voices for the puppets. I mean, there's other actors on there. But it was a wonderful kids show. And one of the things that he disliked, because, you know, TV was pretty new still at that time, because he started out when it was all black and white. Then color came in. And what was going on at that time was cartoons were being made. And of course they found out that they would get the most views and the most people watching TV, or most kids watching cartoons at that time, if they were really fast paced and were, let's say, not intelligent at all. Basically, you know, just a lot of animated characters running around bonking each other on top of the head, you know, and being silly. And Mr. Rogers at the time, he hated that because you weren't teaching kids anything. He understood, even at that time, that this was really hurting our ability as kids to sit, to focus, to not be so addicted to the dopamine rush that you get every time, you know, every few seconds, to be able to calmly read a book or just to sit and watch, you know, nature. And he did one of his shows, he wanted to illustrate the length of a minute. He wanted to show kids what a minute felt like. And this is on TV, guys. Like, what he did was he set a timer, and he set next to this clock that counted down a minute, little clock timer, and he just sat there, quiet, and looked at the screen and was like, here's your minute. And like today, that would never happen. Like no one would ever do that. So you're like, oh my God, you're wasting millions of dollars and blah, blah, blah. So this is the oil painting process. And I need to move my painting up once again to get to the bottom. Thinker says, I see a lot of the canvas color showing through between the strokes and the dark areas. Will you use the same color in the glazing layer to fill them in? Yeah. Or a different, maybe a different hue, but a same value. Yeah, that's kind of part of the process. And in some instances, it's like, oh crap, I really need to go back to this dark color, like a thick, opaque color to fill those in. But for the most part, I found that they add just more and more texture to your painting. Yeah, I don't worry about filling in things that much. If I do it, I'll do it with subsequent layers or with opaque. Depends on what's necessary at the time. Especially with shadows. I mean, shadows I think should be transparent. Okay. I can't move my canvas up anymore, so now I need to tilt my camera down. Sorry for the strange angle that you guys have on this. Maybe you don't see the strange angle. I do, because the camera's facing down. I can't lower the camera anymore than it already is. Yeah, so all of these will kind of show through Let me move this around. Oh my goodness, I just put a huge fingerprint right in the center of what I'm looking at. Maybe our tiger is too dark because it's hard to see on my iPad. We may have to just lighten everything up. The more I look at our digital version now after seeing it, it's good, and it established, you know, a range of values, a relative value range. I think I might bring the whole key of the painting up a bit. We'll see. We'll have to, in order to do that, we'll have to see what, you know, because we have that shock of light color on the tiger's forehead. We'll have to put that down first, and then everything else would be a lower value from that. Yeah, don't worry about, if you do it this way, don't worry about the canvas showing through. That will cover just fine. I mean, I could really thickly kind of go in here and just, you know, fill in these things if I wanted to. You know, maybe smooth. It's more like a smoothing out, like spreading. Here, what can you see? You can see this here. Okay. So I didn't add any more paint to my brush. What I'm doing here is just kind of moving it around on the canvas. So it's filling in all the interstices, all the little divots in the canvas. Really, either way, I don't think this doesn't make a big difference in the final result of your painting. I tend to move a bit faster this way, I guess. And we'll see, you know. Maybe with this one, it does make a big difference. But I don't think so. The only thing I could liken it to would be I did a painting of a nose from a dark-skinned individual. Beautiful skin. Man, I love the richness of their skin. And I was actually working on a white canvas, like a very light canvas. And that was a mistake. It was so hard for me to understand what was what, like what value needed to be there, what it didn't. And at that point I was like, okay, I need to fill in all these spaces. Okay, I need to face the camera down a little bit more so we can get those paws in. And of course, I haven't adjusted the picture of the tiger in the stream. Sorry about that. I'm going to keep it there because, you know, that's going to be where we really get into the, you know, the comparison that needs to happen. Honestly, what I'm doing right now is just a repeat of the charcoal layer. But I may have a moment to mix up some different colors and prepare for tomorrow's painting. Let me see. Yeah, we got about 15 minutes left. So going a bit faster on these paws down here because They're important, but not so much. Not the big focus at all of the painting. And, you know, edges are really important to me as well. Something that you don't see talked about a lot with a lot of these painting tutorials. They don't really talk a lot about edges. Edges are as essential as anything. They're not as essential as drawing and value, but they're essential for getting a visually appealing painting, definitely. Okay, let's get back up to the head. I need to move my canvas again. Okay, back to the head. Could you move the digital side up so we can see the area we're painting on? No, not right now. Sorry, I knew that was going to be pretty quickly done. It's not very essential. And I was thinking, honestly, that each stream I wouldn't have to move it, like I would just focus on an area, but I realized that spreading that darker color around would be beneficial for the continued life of the painting. Okay. We have 15 minutes. What I want to do here is I want to establish the upper range of value and color. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab some white, some titanium white, and a little bit of my Hansa yellow medium. And I'll probably add in some transparent earth orange to this. Lighten it up a little bit. Now what I can do on this palette, let me get a palette knife, and I'm going to take a bit of this white and I'm going to put it right next to what I just mixed. This is for your benefit, so hopefully you can see that on the camera, but you can see the value difference between what we can possibly reach within paint is titanium white. That's the whitest white you can get. We never want to hit that. We want to stay away from it as long as we can. Okay. So I mixed up this color, which is pretty close, but I still have some room to work, right? And now this color I mixed up will be the whitest white that we use. And I don't even have to look over the entire painting. We've worked this painting several times, you know, for months. I know where the whitest white is. It's right here in the shock on the brow where the sunlight hits the white of the tiger right there. Super bright. Look how bright that is on the canvas. That's crazy. I feel like I could probably bring that down a bit as well, you know. Add some more yellow. Let's try this transparent orange out. A little bit more transparent earth orange to kind of bring the intensity down. Still really, really bright. But This is on a neutral gray canvas. Actually, I remember which one I used. I think I used this neutral gray 4 by Williamsburg. It's the only non-Gamblin paints that I have. Let me make sure that this is the right one. Yeah. Neutral gray 4 by Williamsburg. And of course, that is not in focus. I need to get it closer to the tiger. I don't have autofocus on, that way it stays right. But it's Williamsburg paint, neutral gray 4. It could be a, no, I'm pretty sure it was that one. And it's a darker color. So of course this is going to look super, super bright comparatively. And remember what I was saying before, we have to be really careful. You know, picking up some of that dark color into this light color here, because this is, we're working in the extremes right now. And I don't dare try and blend this. Normally through, and a lot of places I work, I would, you know, not worry about it and I would blend that a bit. But I know that this is a bit too extreme and it will kill my light color right now. If anything, I would separate that blending out into a, you know, a separate step. Add some transparent earth orange and a little bit of naphthol crimson. And what I'm doing here, ooh, I tapped some of that dark color. What I'm doing here is experimenting, basically. You're not going to know what color you need to mix. You're not going to get it right when you put it down. What you're going to do is put it down in a way where it's easy to fix. So these little daubs of color that's easy to fix. It's easy to move around because it's not very thick. And you're going to learn from that. Everything that you put down, you're going to learn from it and then begin adjusting. And you're like, oh, okay, now I finally hit the color that I want. So it's always, you know, the first few strokes are experimentation. And it's a relative game as well. The more you get down, the more relative color you get around everything, and the better idea you get of what things need to be. So I just mixed up some naphthol scarlet with some transparent orange and my yellow there to get some more intense colors to see what that looks like. And now I'm going to try something completely different. I'm going to go with alizarin permanent, which is a color that has a very high tint strength, which means it will take a lot of other color to adjust that. Oh, what a nice orange that makes. Alizarin permanent plus Hansa yellow medium. Let's see what that looks like. Let's put it over here. Nice. Yeah, kind of figuring things out here, you know? Trying out different mixtures, having fun. Not worrying about getting this right on. But that looks pretty darn good. I'm happy with that. It's probably a bit too intense. The reason why I don't worry about it so much is because once I get this whole area filled in of, you know, this orangish color or colors in places, I'm going to realize that I'm off in a couple You know, maybe it's too saturated. Maybe it's too light. Maybe it's the wrong hue altogether, which I don't think so. It's going to be around an orange, but we'll mainly deal with saturation. So let's say I add a little sap green. You know, we'll do it down here. So it's separated from everything. I need more of my previous color. So a desaturated color. See what that looks like. You know, bring some of the... Too much there. Bring some of this lighter mixture into it. See, it's a very desaturated color there. And then how does that look when this turns into the brow of the tiger? That doesn't work very well. Okay. What if we bring a bit of a gray into it? That's a bit better. So really kind of playing around here and getting some understanding. I'm gonna go back to that analogy of getting into the ballpark, right? We have no idea where our seats are. The first thing we need to do is just get inside the ballpark and try and figure it out. So we know it's an orange. We know we're going to be around an orange color. So let's start there. Oh, and there we are, 5:30. I hope that went as quickly for you guys as it did for me. But that did not feel like an hour and a half painting. So here's where, this is going to take a while to work up the head of the tiger, which is our main center of interest. I'm going to be spending the whole next stream on the first layer of this tiger, the tiger's head, and maybe the stream after it. I won't stream on Sunday. I think I'm going to stop streaming on Sunday. Sundays are going to be like my no stream days. Wow, that does look how fantastic that looks. What do you think, Thinker? I mean, I'm loving that orange on the gray and the black. It's like, wow, it just jumps out. I can't wait. This is going to look fantastic. Yeah. I feel like no matter what I do, I'm going to make a successful painting because we worked so hard on getting it to this point, on each step in the process, making sure that it worked well. What I will show you before I end up is my cleanup process. This is important, okay? This is very important. Do not skip this step. When you're done painting for the day, I work on a glass palette and I have a razor blade. And I go around for each of my daubs of color and I scrape off those little areas that may have mixed color within them that I can see that my brush touched. Usually I'll pull off the entirety of my burnt umber. Yeah, which I'm gonna do because that's gonna dry before tomorrow. So the burnt umber is gonna go away. Especially the white. Gotta pull off any of those mixtures on the white. And then I'll scrape down my palette. I don't save any of those color mixtures. You don't need them. Don't try and save them unless you've mixed up just a ton of the color, okay? Mix it up again. The reason why you want to do that is because it just gets you used to judging color. You know, spend the extra time to mix that up, whatever color it is. It will add interest to your painting. More and more interest as you mix up colors that are a little bit different. Now the next thing I do is I have this. This is not my brush washer. This is my brush cleaner. Let me see if I can hold this so you can see it. And it's, I think I showed you Thinker. It's like a Holbein airtight cleaner, which I just have safflower oil in there. And I just put my brush in there. This will help get about 90% of all that paint that I mixed up off the brush. And then I squeeze it out in a paper towel. Maybe do it a couple times. I gotta do both brushes. And I only use 2 brushes, by the way. For the lighter side of the tiger, I used a brush just for the whites, the lighter colors, and one brush for, hey, thanks guys, I see that, amazing, it pops beautifully, thanks guys, I appreciate that. So, I've seen artists that use like a multitude of brushes, one for each color, you know, in their painting, one for the background, one for this, one for that. I just use 2, one for the light, one for the dark. And that helps keep things not so muddy. But so I clean out those brushes a bit, and then I put them, after that, they're gonna go into my soak. If you want more information on that, check out my video on non-toxic oil painting. It'll show you all about that. It's one of my first videos. It was like a year ago that I made that. And those will sit in that soak until tomorrow and be just as ready as they are right now to continue painting. It'll take me no time to set up tomorrow because all these colors will be on the palette except for my burnt umber. So I'll pull my brushes out, I'll get the safflower oil out of them, I'll have my palette ready, put a burnt umber, and then I'm painting within just a couple moments. And that's really important because don't waste your time every day with your setup. If you have like a 30-minute setup process with your oil painting, it makes it that much harder for you to get started oil painting every day. So make sure that you, get as efficient as possible on your setup. Okay, I've rambled enough. That's an hour and a half live stream. We got a lot done on this. Tomorrow, it's going to be nothing but the bright, awesome color on this painting. Yeah, it's going to look great, guys. All right. I can't stop the stream until I get up and walk over there, but I will see you guys tomorrow.